Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of and officers of the Council. There's no members of the public. Welcome to this meeting of the Standards Committee. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security door to the left of the chairman or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the Green. Officers will assist you and advise you when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Does anyone intend filming the meeting? Good. There's no members of the public here. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public, except for any item of business where exempt or confidential information is considered following the exclusion of the press and public from the meeting. The meeting is also being recorded and will be broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel. Will everyone please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive calls in the chamber during this meeting. I have Councillor Garner to speak on item 5 and Councillors Garner and Bailey to speak on item 6. Is that correct?
No, I'm on 4 and 5.
Okay.
Apologies.
Apologies have been received from Councillor Cupp and the Council's independent person, Dennis James. Are there any other apologies? Good. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of November 2021 be approved and signed as a correct record. Could I have a seconder, please? Unless anyone objects to the minutes, I'll take them as agreed. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Item agenda 4 is revision to delegations. Mr. Hughes, Committee Services Manager, would you like to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so this report is regarding recommending amending this Council scheme of delegations to authorise the Chief Executive to declare vacancies in office under Section 86 of the Local Government Act 1972. What I would start with is that this is regarding when a councillor ceases to be a councillor through means of disqualification, so either through failure to attend meetings, being disqualified through committing a crime and being sentenced to prison sentence of more than 3 months.
What I would start with is
it doesn't relate to resignation and neither does it relate to death.
Ceases to be a councillor through means
So it's only in a very specific set of circumstances. What we are suggesting is that the Chief Executive is allowed to declare vacancies, whereas at the moment that is currently reserved to full council. So you can, as we've recently witnessed, have a rather odd situation whereby a councillor can become disqualified from being a councillor. However, they would remain a councillor up until the point that full council agrees to make the declaration of vacancy, even though that person should technically be disqualified. Now, that isn't particularly helpful for the member concerned, and neither is it very helpful for the council. And in many other councils across the country, this is delegated to the Chief Executive so that once the discussions and backroom discussions about the validity of whether that person has been disqualified have been concluded, a declaration of vacancy can then be immediately made, and that then allows the council to get on with the process of organising a by-election. I think that was all I wanted to say on that, I don't think. Yeah, no. Any questions? Happy to answer them.
So, Councillor Crowe-Brown's in front of your name. So, Councillor Duckworth.
Don't forget Councillor.
Yeah, it seems to me that the recommendation doesn't really make it clear in what circumstances this can happen. So you said it could only happen in the circumstances if somebody hadn't attended meetings or if they had a prison sentence of more than 3 months. So I'd be happy to vote for it if it actually says in the recommendation I'd happy to say, we can recommend this to get these to council, I believe. If it said that, because it seems like there could be other circumstances.
The recommendation effectively says that by saying declarations by declaring vacancies in office under Section 86 of the Local Government Act 72. So the circumstances where she's allowed to do that are outlined within the local Section 86. So she wouldn't be able to do any other declarations of interest, declarations of vacancy for anything else. And also, you don't need to do a declaration of vacancy for a death or a resignation. So it would just be in the circumstances.
Well, no, it's not, there are other circumstances than deaths and resignations, and the ones that, sometimes it can be complicated, or sometimes there can be other reasons why somebody may need to be disqualified, but it could be disputed. So does the Section 86 only refer to those two that you mentioned? What would happen if there was, if somebody, I don't know, a conflict of interest or something like that was disputed?
The only other one that springs to mind is where somebody's employed by the council. Is the only other way that you can be disqualified from being a councillor. So there's the only, as far as I'm aware, that's the only three reasons, isn't it, that cover the disqualification element of it, which is you're employed by the council, so you immediately cease. You're sentenced to prison over 3 months, or you don't attend for 6 months. That's the only three reasons why you can be disqualified. And then anything else that's not a disqualification, you don't need, because the only other way you would do it is death or resignation. So, yeah.
Okay, and how would the backroom discussions take place? You said that it'd be sort of decided.
Yeah, perhaps if I can just step in here. So all we're saying is that delegating the authority to the chief executive makes it a speedier process than having to wait for the next council meeting, because the legislation says that once somebody hasn't attended meetings for 6 months, the council shall declare the vacancy, and that's the point. The declaration is the point when the vacancy arises, and it says the council shall declare the vacancy forthwith, and the only meaning of forthwith is as soon as possible. So if you haven't got another council meeting scheduled for another 2 months, you've either got to hold an extraordinary council meeting, and then there's the usual notice requirements and getting everybody together for that. So inevitably there's some delay. But if we delegated it to the chief executive, it doesn't mean that if there's an allegation that somebody hasn't attended for 6 months, Madeleine's going to instantly issue that declaration. She would obviously talk to the person's group leader, the person themselves probably, the other group leaders. There would be a process of discussion about it. And the other thing to remember is that if the council has delegated it to the chief executive, there's no reason why the council itself still can't exercise that power. So if there were any doubt, it could be that it went to full council for decision. But this just means that there is a speedier resolution. Like the unfortunate situation we had recently, it caused a lot of angst, no doubt for the member, I know for the member concerned, and a lot of pain generally. And actually, if we'd had a speedier process, once we'd clarified the situation, and it was quite obvious actually, once we looked at the attendance stats, and the legislation is quite clear in its wording, because it says 6 months from the date of the last attendance. So it's absolutely clear. And Nick and I looked into it in great detail. So it just allows, once you've been through that bit of a debate about the timing and everybody's sure of what's going on, it just allows it to happen more quickly. It doesn't say that we're going to go off and have all these rogue chief executive decisions left, right and centre. That just wouldn't happen. I mean, she just wouldn't do that. But it just means the mechanics of it are more easily dealt with, really. If that helps. So yeah, no, I understand that, in that particular case, obviously it would have been a lot easier. So the legislation only allows for those 3 circumstances then for disqualification. Well, as long as as long as that's minuted, that I've said that's what
I think I'm recommending, and that's fine.
Can I just come and clarify something? So the problem is with these various circumstances when somebody ceases to be a councillor, it's about the date of the vacancy. So if somebody resigns or if somebody unfortunately passes away, the vacancy instantly arises. So there's no need for a declaration. So it's just sort of happens. It's those issues where there has to be a date of a declaration, like this circumstance here. So it means you're in this period of limbo because the vacancy hasn't arisen, even though they are disqualified by operation of law. So it just creates that sort of awkward limbo situation of a few weeks, because the legislation says the vacancy only arises on the declaration, whereas if somebody resigns, it arises on the point of notification of the resignation automatically.
Yeah, that's all understood, as providing it's just in those three circumstances, then it's fine.
I think it's a case of, from the outside looking in, speeding up the process. Councillor Garner, you wish to comment?
Oh, actually, my correction earlier was incorrect, so I apologise for that. I got my numbering wrong on my notes. I'm here to speak on items 5 and 6, as correctly stated.
Thank you for your honesty. Councillor Scobie.
Thank you. Can I just ask out of interest, what does Democratic Services do when somebody is getting close to their 6 months? Do they inform the chief whip of the party? Do they talk to the person? It's just, I remember many years ago, a lady from the villages, whose name escapes me, she had a stroke and she wasn't able to attend council meetings for more than 6 months, and we actually extended her term of attendance. Pickering, her name was Pickering, Audrey Pickering.
Yeah, we don't, it's not Democratic Services' responsibility to tell members when they're within the 6 months. However, that being said, if members do let us know if there's an ongoing health issue, for example, then we can, at the request of either the group leader or full council, put a report to full council, and full council can grant that individual an extension of time beyond the 6 months. But it's very clear within the legislation that the decision to extend the 6 months must be made within the 6 month period. It can't be that they come to the end of the 6 months and then say, well, I'm not very well, can I have some more time? It's very clear that if you tell us within 6 months of the last time you went to a meeting that you're not very well, we can put a process in train that allows for an extension. But obviously, if we don't know, then we can't do anything about that.
So in this recent event, the person hadn't informed you that she'd had a stroke?
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's quite straightforward, and I'd like to propose that we accept the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Fellows. Do you wish me to read the recommendation, or are you all ready to, are you happy with it? Could I have a seconder then, please? Councillor Crowbrow. Right, going on to item agenda 5. Sorry, you want to vote? I do apologise. I'm not used to him sitting on my shoulder. Could we take a vote on that, please? Those in favour? Those against? Unanimous. Yeah. Right. Item agenda 5. The recommendations in this report were considered by the Constitutional Review Working Party on the 23rd of February 2022. After discussion on the matter, they agreed to put to the Standards Committee that CRWP recommends to the Standards Committee that the Council make amendments to Council Procedure Rule 2.4 regarding the Leaders' Report as outlined in Annex 1 to the report. I have Councillor Garner who wishes to speak under Council Rule Procedure 20.1.
Thank you. Yes, I am prepared for this item. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to raise a couple of points relating to the proposed changes to the leaders' report section. Firstly, and speaking as currently the leader of one of the groups, I believe it is helpful for leaders of other groups to be able to submit questions a few days before to enable the leader to prepare answers in advance of the meeting. This is a welcome suggestion. I cannot, however, accept that any further questions which may arise should be ruled out of order. I can envisage a scenario where another question not thought of earlier may occur during exchanges with other leaders. Are we really saying that these should be ruled out of order? If an answer can't be provided on the night, I'm sure we are prepared to wait a couple of days for them. I'm concerned, additionally, because we are in danger of making our council meetings so sterile and scripted that we might as well cancel the meeting altogether and just issue a report. And I'm sure none of us want that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. I think Mr Hughes would like to come back on that.
I'll outline the report. I'm sure I'll come back on that particular point, but I can outline the report for you. So the Leader of the Council has asked Democratic Services to propose a number of amendments to the Council Procedure Rules regarding the Leader's Report. And as outlined by Councillor Garner, that is to ask group leaders of opposition groups to submit their questions on the Leader's Report to the Leader in advance of the meeting, and that would then allow the Leader more time to provide a comprehensive answer at the meeting itself. In order to do this, the requirements of the Constitution that would need to change would make it so that the Leader of the Council would make their report available in writing a week, at least a week in advance of the meeting. Currently, that happens on the Saturday before the meeting. Then the leader of any political group must then provide the leader and chairman with any questions that they intend to ask as part of their response to the leader's speech by close of business on the Tuesday prior to the meeting. And as was referred to, any questions on the leader's speech that were not submitted in advance by the political group leaders would be then ruled as inadmissible by the chairman. This was again considered, as the chairman has mentioned, at the last meeting of the Constitutional Review Working Party. One thing that was mentioned at the last meeting was that if there was a situation whereby some unexpected news event had happened between the point at which the leader's report had been issued by the leader and the actual council meeting, if the chairman was so agreed to let the leader add a piece of detail to the leader's report, then opposition group leaders would also then get the opportunity to add in a further question based on the added content by the leader. Although that's not added into the rules here, because that is actually in the gift of the chairman. So it's his prerogative to do that. So that is the proposed change. So happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, in view of the fact that leaders will have seen the report, except in the situation that Nick's has already described, where something new occurs, I can't see why there would be any questions that they hadn't already thought about. So I would have thought this was fairly straightforward, except in the situation described, and in which case I feel sure that if it was something quite important, the chairman would be very happy to accept questions. So I'm very happy to support this.
That was discussed, and as you rightly say, if it was important enough, it would be included, and the chair would no doubt allow questions. Councillor Crittenden.
Thank you. I have to say that some of what I'm about to say is going to support what Councillor Garner has already said, because I was really quite surprised to see this amendment, this proposal come given that the leader came into the role with a strong message about improving the functioning of the council, I'm not sure this does that. And I'm surprised that the Constitutional Review Working Party also agreed with it. I understand the reasoning about coming with more comprehensive answers, but if we're going to make changes to the Constitution, we must not look only at the impact of those changes now, but what those changes are going to do in future administrations and future generations. And so my primary objection to the proposed change is that it's effectively going to contribute to the silencing of the political voice and discourse of the council and give more power and responsibility to the officers, who are the ones who will inevitably be providing the answers to the questions. My secondary question was, I think you've actually answered, which was that it won't allow for the raising of any emergency issues. Although the fact that you said that it will be constrained to only if the leader mentions it first, I'm not sure that that helps. I'm sure there'll be some leaders who will appreciate being able to use officers taking responsibility for answering the questions. But is that what we want to encourage? Isn't it our responsibility to our electorates to keep this chamber as democratic as possible, to promote openness and freedom of speech instead of, to quote Councillor Garner, sterilising it yet more? I also have to ask if now is actually an appropriate time to be making this kind of change to the Constitution when we're still in the middle of this significant piece of work by the Independent Monitoring Officer to bring about improvements in the overall functioning of the Council. And an intervention which Councillor Ashby herself welcomed. And I would have thought that this proposed amendment cuts across that piece of work. And I would like to propose that we refer this proposal to the Independent Monitoring Officer for further advice or action. Thank you.
I'll second that.
First time you heard it as well.
Yeah, so I think that's a valid amendment that's been proposed and seconded. So do we want to talk about that amendment, or do we want to take a vote on that amendment? I believe the amendment is that we refer the whole of this item to Quentin to have a look at and comment on. Is that correct? So all the amendments on the item on the leader's report.
So in a nutshell, agenda item 5, you want referring to the Independent Monitoring Officer. And I've got a proposer which was Councillor Crittenden and Councillor Scobie was a seconder. All those in favour?
Yeah, sorry, however we deal with it, whether we deal with it as an amendment or simply a proposal, I just do have a comment in that, so Mr Baker has been enormously helpful and is, working away feverishly. He may say, I don't know, but he may say this is outside of his remit. But we can, if that's what you would like to do, then of course I can ask him if he would like to comment on it. That's not a problem.
Can I just say
Councillor Scobie wishes to say something.
Yes, the word sterile, that shouts at me as what we're doing to the democracy of the council. I've got used to, over the last few years, the cut and thrust of the leaders sparring with each other, and it actually makes for more interesting political debate. It seems that we're now getting a leaders' report which is a week old, and before, I think the leader, before COVID, the leader occasionally released their report to other group leaders, perhaps on the day or the day before. We're now giving 7 days, and in that time, issues can change, new issues can come up, and I think it will be anti-democratic. Thank you.
Mr Lorenzo, I believe you want to say something?
purely speaking, as an independent member, I would prefer to see the cut and thrust remain within the council chamber. This does actually stultify to an extent, and I would regret it if it were approved.
Councillor Crittenden, did you wish to say something?
The only thing is, responding to Estelle, was that the wording was for further advice or action, as appropriate as the independent monitoring officer decides.
Councillor Bayford?
Thank you, Chair. I disagree. I feel that questions to the leader should be genuine questions based on the report, nothing more. I cannot see why anyone would be unwilling to declare their questions in advance. We've already covered the situation where something new arises, so I cannot see any reason for it to go to the independent monitoring officer. Thank you.
So, Councillor Dexter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we just be clear on this? Whatever we decide, has it got to be ratified at full council? Whatever we decide this evening, has it got to be ratified at full council? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, the next full council is on the 31st of March, so we don't have long to wait, so we can, whatever you decide, if you decide on any amendments, we can get it to that meeting on the 31st of March.
So we've now got the proposal and a seconder. Can I take a vote? Those in favour? Those against? 4. Can we now go to item agenda 6? And I think Councillor Garner wants to speak on this also. Or have you got your sums wrong?
No, my sums are correct. We're all correct on this one. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. One of the constitutional amendments which recently improved things was when the length of questions asked by members was increased from 50 to 150 letters. It gave us a chance to outline more of the context of the question for the benefit of our residents, who I'm sure we all agree are the people we need to be working harder to engage with the whole process of the council meeting. I see this proposed change as a retrograde step to that. I think it's important to encourage questions on operational matters in the public forum of our council meetings, so that our residents have an opportunity to hear the answers. After all, it's usually because of correspondence received from residents that we ask these questions in the first place. I'm also disappointed that you seem to be taking this opportunity to discourage members who do ask questions from doing so by giving the chair more power to hinder their opportunity to ask follow-up questions. Cabinet members often have long answers to read out, prepared by officers, and the member who asked the question in the first place might need a few moments to gather their thoughts before asking their follow-up question. I think the chair should be there to support all members by encouraging participation rather than closing it down. I would rather see a change to the constitution along those lines than this one encouraging this, or future chairs to close down members of the council whose main motive, after all, is to attempt to participate in the democratic process on behalf of their residents. Please can you reconsider this proposed change? And I would just like to add to that these comments are around the constitution, around previous one around the leader role, not personal. It's around the role of the leader, and this is around the role of the members and the role of the chair, whoever it may be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. I believe Councillor Bailey, you wish to say something?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. I think Councillor Garner's been looking at my notes. Mine are very similar. So yes, I did follow the discussion last week online with slight concern. I do understand, the concern that run-of-the-mill operational questions could be asked directly, but that's not always the case. We don't always get a response. And in general, I think most of the questions generally are, of import to our residents. So asking questions at full council is one of the very few occasions that backbench councillors like myself have to air their concerns and to bring issues that affect their wards to the fore. And I would also plug the point that independent councillors like me do not have the same channels of communication that members of a party have, and so this is a further opportunity to seek information and clarification on matters. I'd like to think that all and any questions put forward by members is for the ultimate interest and benefit of their community, and not, as was mentioned at a previous meeting, for grandstanding or political posturing. With all respect to the leader and her invitation to knock on her door, many of the questions that are asked are of interest to the wider community, and a full and transparent response to an important question deserves to be heard, in my opinion, and minuted. The second point about supplementary questions, of course, I totally agree that supplementary questions should arise from and be connected to the original question. But as Councillor Garner said, there's often a lot to absorb in the response to the substantive question. And sometimes there's a moment's reflection needed to formulate a further unrehearsed question in response. It certainly doesn't help this thinking process when the chair is constantly trying to chivvy you up. A supplementary question also needs to be given a little context. So my suggestion would be that maybe a maximum of 2 uninterrupted minutes were given to ask a supplementary question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. The report was considered by the Constitutional Review Working Party on the 23rd of February, and after discussion on the matter, they agreed to put to the Standards Committee that Council Procedure Rule 14.6, there should be no restriction on questions relating to straightforward operational matters at this time. This will be reviewed in 6 months following the implementation of the members' portal. That the bullet point related to a matter which has already been raised as a standards complaint against a member and which has not yet been concluded through the Code of Conduct procedures be added to the list of reasons that would invalidate a question. And Council Procedure Rule 14.8, that the following sentence be added to the end of the existing paragraph. The question must be a question and not a statement and rise directly out of the response. And I'll ask Estelle to introduce the report, please. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I think the Chair has summed it up really, but I'll just go through and give you a bit of a bit more of an explanation about the thinking of CRWP. So the matter arose because of some concerns about some of the recent questions that have been asked at Council. And so CRWP were asked to look at the Procedure Rule 14, which is members' questions of either the leader or chairs of committees at Council. And I think the concerns have been raised because there had been some recent questions at Council either related to straightforward operational matters that it was felt could be better directed at officers, or questions about matters over which the council has little control, for example, government guidance and government planning policy, even though the questions were couched in district council terms. So CRWP were asked to consider whether they wish to propose any amendments to the rules on members' questions, but in their discussion, and we did have quite a lot of discussion about it, the group were very conscious of the important role that members' questions play in holding the administration to account and in promoting democracy, which is obviously what you've said, Councillor Bailey. So they had quite a big discussion about this issue of operational questions and or questions on operational matters, and whether, as one of the criteria for refusing questions, we say that if a question is a straightforward operational matter, it won't be allowed. So that you will see on the report that there is a suggested amendment in red to the grounds for refusal relating to operational questions. But then CRWP talked about the fact that we've got this app in development, which you should all be aware about, I hope, excuse me, which is hopefully, well, I think we're all terrified by it, so me included, which should improve this communication channel between members and officers, and hopefully will encourage those of us who were sometimes a bit slow to reply to actually deal with things and get back to you, and hopefully it will just improve that process. So what CRWP wanted to do was to not put in that operational questions will not be answered, as it were, double negative. Wait until the app has been rolled out and see how it's working, and then revisit the question again. So for the time being, we're not putting in anything about you can't ask operational questions. So obviously that's the proposal from CRWP. And then the second proposal, was that if we've got a live code of conduct complaint or investigation against a member and a question is asked directly relating to that same issue, that the question shouldn't be allowed. And that makes a lot of sense, because when we have code of conduct matters going on, we do stress to the person raising the complaint and the person complained about, the member complained about, that it's a confidential issue, and we ask them not to comment publicly on it. So it seems rather unfair to the member complained about that if we're saying that in the process, that other members should be allowed to ask questions directly related to that matter. And that arose recently, so CRWP thought that was quite a sensible amendment to make to the rules on members' questions. And the final amendment, which is self-evident, because you've talked about it and the chair's mentioned it, relates to supplementary questions. And this just arose out of the slight frustration at supplementary questions not really being questions, but being more of a fairly long-winded statement on some occasions. And so it was suggested that we put in this emphasis of the wording that the follow-up question must be a question, not a statement, and must arise directly out of the response to the first question. So those are the amendments proposed by CRWP, but it's entirely within your gift to accept them, reject them, or to make some additional or different amendments, in fact. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Estelle. Can I just say it was a long discussion. What we were concerned about, especially this bit about the supplementary question, that some members were actually speaking for 2 minutes or so in making a statement rather than asking the question. And that's why we've tried to get it into the system to make it a lot fairer for people who want to ask questions back to whoever's being spoken to at the time. Councillor Crittenden.
Thank you. I can assure you I have no motions at the end of this, but just to comment on it. And I also can assure you that I have not liaised with Councillors Garner or Bailey before coming tonight. I do understand the whole thing about not asking straightforward operational matter questions. But I think as come out of the Constitutional Review Working Party comments, we have had difficulties in getting answers, and I think that is partly why that's happened. The other thing that has also happened is that when we do get answers, those answers aren't always very helpful. So I might ask, when is something likely to happen? No, I'm saying likely, not. I don't want it in stone. I'm not going to hold your toes to the fire. If you tell me it's going to happen on the 10th of March, I'm not going to expect that, roughly. But very often you get the answer back, it's on the to-do list. It'll happen in due course. That's non-information. It's meaningless. If I say, how long is it likely to take before something happens, and the officer comes back and says, it's on the action list, I've still got no idea. And so those kind of communications can take months before we get to something resembling an answer. And so the thing that I want to raise is that the Constitutional Review Working Party's recommendation, I'm happy with, to defer this until the hub has got going. I've seen the hub. I was horrified at my first glance, but it was very, very much the first draft, and they took on board all of our suggestions, and I'm looking forward to actually seeing how it works. But But I would like not just a quantitative analysis of how well the hub works, but a qualitative analysis as well. So are we getting replies, but are those replies any more meaningful than they have been? Does that all make sense? I hope it does. I think the Second Amendment on here, fine. That's, there's no query on that. But I did also want to comment on the Third Amendment in this section. It just seems that our chair was, in the early days, perhaps a little too lenient with some of us. And we're now reaping the rewards of that. He has become rather overly robust, as was the wording of the original suggestion in the last meeting or so. And I think that there is hopefully that we'll be able to find somewhere in between. But like Councillor Bailey, I actually do think that if you just drop in a question without at least a sentence or two to say why that answer that you've just heard needs a supplementary question, then I think that it then is harmful again to the democratic process. And I've felt a lot of what we've talked about tonight. We talked about how things have become sterile, and sometimes, the fun, the banter has gone. And I'm just a little bit concerned that this last one is yet another slicing away of that. So I would like it to include, with Councillor Bailey, just let us just say a sentence or two at the beginning, because the last couple of times it's been got to go straight into the question, and you can't do that always, and sometimes it doesn't make sense if you do that. Thank you.
I can't speak on behalf of obviously the officers on who will be responsible for the quality assurance of the members' portal, and I don't think it would be in the remit of this committee to deal with the quality issues. I think I might be right, Mr. Hughes.
We can certainly take that on board. But yeah, it's not a matter for this committee, but we can certainly absolutely mention that to when we do that. That's not a
if
problem.
you could, because I know that the hub or the portal is one of the things that is going to come out of it is a quantitative measurement, and that is what the hub can do, and it will be good at that. But at the same time, at the end of that, it's all very well to say, yes, you're getting answers, but can you actually come to us and say, are those answers worth anything? Are they better than they were before? Because they might be. That might be the case, because once it's more controlled and senior officers are less under pressure by reams of emails, because I do feel sorry for senior officers who are getting buried under reams of emails. But that's why we want that as well. And as a backbencher, frankly, communication's the worst thing on the planet here. Yes. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wants to make any comments?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy, particularly with the hub coming into effect on the first one. Second, on the supplementary questions, I think this is absolutely right. The questions must be related to the first one. It's unfair on the person answering the question. It's not supposed to be to catch them out. It's supposed to be helpful and to clarify the answer that's given. Question time is limited in council meetings. Therefore, the longer somebody goes on introducing something and with a lot of background that we probably already know about, it means perhaps that someone else can't have a question. I think it's important that we do stick to actual questions related clearly to the first. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you just give me 1 minute? Following a quick discussion without any statements, what we intend to do, if we break down what the recommendation has been put forward to tonight's meeting into 3 sections, and we will seek proposers and seconders and take a vote on each one. And I think are all members agreed with that? Thank you. So the first point is Council Procedural 14.6 bullet point 1, there should be no restriction on questions relating to straightforward operational matters at this time. This would be reviewed in 6 months following the implementation of the members' portal. Could I have a proposer? Councillor Bayford and a seconder, Councillor Crittenden. All those in favour?
That's unanimous.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. I didn't hear what you said.
I need to talk to people, not fill bloody electronic forms in.
Being a dinosaur, I would second that. Right. Bullet point 2, that the bullet point related to the matter which has already been raised as standards complaint against a member and which has not yet been concluded through the Code of Conduct procedures be added to the list of reasons that would invalidate a question. Could I have a proposal? Councillor Fellows. Those in favour? Yeah, unanimous. Thank you. Till we get to this one. Right. Council Procedure Rule 14.8, that the following sentence be added to the end of the existing paragraph. The question must be a question and not a statement and rise directly out of the response. Could I have a proposer?
Sorry, before that, what I've somewhere in here, it says, next bit, it says members are asked to consider whether to accept the original suggested amendments or to accept recommendations and or make additional suggestions. Can we make an additional suggestion to that one that pre-question should be no more than a sentence or a brief sentence or two, as Councillor Bailey and I.
Can I suggest, I think that will be a proposal once we've voted on this third point? Because I've got a feeling that might be rejected. And then add a proposal.
So it's whatever.
Councillor Crittenden, have you got a wording that you wish to add into that proposal?
I wasn't prepared for that.
I'd have let you had a week's notice if I'd known.
An introduction to the question should be no more than, should be only very brief. I think, or should be brief.
But it's controlled by the 2 minutes.
Well, it is partly.
So if you use the 2 minutes up in your preamble, you don't get the question.
Right, so I think what we're saying is...
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Can I?
Having a statement.
Yeah, so sorry, can I just clarify this? At the moment, the proposal is, or when it's proposed, the recommendation is that we add the following sentence. The question must be, this is to supplemental questions, the question must be a question and not a statement and rise directly out of the response. And I believe, Councillor Crittenden, what you want to add to that sentence is an introduction to the question should be very brief. Is that correct? So that's an amendment. That's an amendment that you're proposing, which we need a seconder for.
Councillor Scobie is a seconder for the amendment.
Should we say an introduction to the question can be given, but should be very brief?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can say that, yeah.
Yes, I think Councillor Crittenden, would you agree to that? that, what was it, fire?
Okay.
An introduction to the question can be given, but should be very brief. Right. So that is an amendment. So first of all, do we need to get rid of the first proposal?
No.
Okay,
So
fine.
we're going to have
Councillor
debate
Bayford.
now.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I think an introduction being brief is subjective. What may be brief to one person is not to another. And also, if the question is directly related to the first question, which it should be, why would there be need for any introduction? Thank you.
Councillor Crittenden.
Because you might need to explain why the answer was inadequate.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to make any comment? So can we now then have a proposer for the amendment, please? We've already got one.
And a
Mr.
seconder.
Councillor Scobie. Yeah. Can we now take a vote and are we agreed to put that forward? All those in favour of the amendment?
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, yeah.
Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
The amendment is lost.
So we're
back now to the original proposal, and I need a proposer and a seconder for it, and I'll just go over it so we know what we're saying. That the following sentence be added at the end of the existing paragraph. The question must be a question and not a statement and rise directly out of the response. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Fellows. Councillor Bayford, second. All those in agreement? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And those against? 2. Right. That proposal is carried. So if we can now move on to item agenda 7, which is the lead, my report. I think you've all seen it and read it, and I'm happy to take any questions. Has anybody got anything to raise before it goes to full council on the 31st of March? Could I please have a proposer and a seconder to put my report to the full council? Councillor Crowbound and Councillor Scobie. Agenda item 8, standards complaint statistics.
agreed.
Sorry. Are we all in agreement with the last proposal? It's statements and questions time. Does anyone have any questions regarding the current standards complaint statistics? If not, would members please note them? Does anybody wish to make any comment?